Welcome to OK Miniatures. The inspiration for this week's project came from some clips of Jurassic Park that I happened across in my wanderings through the maze of YouTube. In particular, a few clips of velociraptors getting trained. Big shocker to anyone who looked at the thumbnail. Well, in this world, unlike in Jurassic Park, raptors are at least somewhat loyal, to the point where one knight managed to convince one to let him ride it. I was unable to find a mini of a knight riding a raptor, although I did find a nice collection of knights and dinosaurs by Mini Monster Mayhem, which I may revisit at some point. Instead, I found a raptor on Thingiverse that one of the knights from a set of Crusaders that I had could ride. I printed out the raptor in a handful of sizes and went with one that was a similar height to the horses from the Crusader box. This is almost certainly not to scale. I have no idea what the actual size of a raptor was, and for the purposes of this diorama, I don't really care. I'm pretty confident they weren't big enough to ride, and they went extinct around the time of the flood, long before the Crusades, so, oh well. I'm just having fun, and I want these two knights to be able to look each other in the eye without craning their necks. Now that I had the minis picked out, I started working on the base. I just want a simple jousting match in a muddy field, like muddy to the point where there isn't a field. I cut a chunk of SPS foam into a rectangle that seemed like it'd fit the minis well, and then cut a thin piece of cardboard to protect the bottom of the foam from getting dinged, which I glued on with some hot glue. The sides will have to fend for themselves. This jousting match is a formal affair, so it needs a nice little barrier down the middle, but it's not a prestigious event, so there won't be any frills. I used some small wooden dowels for the main posts of the structure and glued them together using my cutting mat to keep it flat. I made the end vertical posts a little bit taller since I intended to stick them into the foam for some added stability. Then I thinly sliced some craft sticks, which I added as diagonal supports. After leaving it all to dry, I carefully sliced the fence off my mat and all but destroyed it. I managed to reassemble it though, for the most part. Since the fence was a struggle, I switched over to the base, hoping that being able to place the fence on it would improve things. It would not, but Pasquet was full of such hope. I mixed up some mud from glue, casting powder, and brown paint. Once the paste started to dry, I smoothed out any large ridges and lines in the mud with my fingers. After spreading the mixture over the surface, I attempted to add the dilapidated fence, which became more dilapidated in the process. What a fiasco. Once the fence was in place, I glued its fallen pieces back on and it returned to being a slightly subpar fence. After letting the mud dry for a few minutes, it was much less sticky, so I could add some details. An extra one of the dowels I had was the perfect size for the horse's hoof, so I used it to texture the mud with hoof prints. There was only one raptor at this jousting match, so I only added prints up to where the raptor would be glued in place. Fortunately too, because it wasn't easy getting the right prints down. The ground was looking a bit too smooth and not like torn up dirt, so I gently gave it a little more texture with some balled up tin foil, careful not to hide the footprints too much. I left that overnight to dry, then I covered everything except the wood with Mod Podge mixed with black paint. This will act as a base coat, and the Mod Podge will help protect the exposed foam and cardboard from moisture and light damage. I kept the paint job simple for the base. For the dirt, I used my standard brown, which conveniently is called earth brown. Good enough for me. I followed that up with dry brushing of tan, which I think was a bit bright to go on its own, so I gave it a wash using some watered down cocoa brown paint. And I used the same wash to stain the wooden fence, which I think helped pull it all together. With the base ready to go, I moved on to the miniatures. I started by gluing the knights to their steeds. To get the raptor rider to sit nicely, I had to trim away some plastic. I was going to make him a saddle, but then I forgot and glued him on, but I'll work that into the story. I did need to slice their arms off their bodies so I could reposition the lances to be more appropriate for jousting. Oh, don't be all dramatic. Your hands aren't supposed to be fused to your sides. I glued the minis to a piece of cardboard and took them outside to prime. I spray painted a zenithal highlight on the minis using red and blue because my white spray can wasn't working, and because spray painting bright colors is fun. In hindsight, I should have had the minis facing different ways so the bright side would be on the same side, but I wasn't planning on the multicolor thing anyway, and the spray paint will get covered. Originally I didn't have a color scheme for these guys, so I just stuck with what the spray paint colors were, and I'm realizing that all my reptilian creatures are deep red. I'm gonna have to fix that someday, but not today. So a little about this diorama while I paint these minis. This jousting event is actually the debut event of the first Raptor Knight, hence the single set of Raptor footprints and the lack of a saddle. This raptor is known as the Blood Skunk, partly because of his markings and partly because of what happened here. Raptors are predators, even if they've been trained. So, in this match, the Blue Knight unseated the Blood Skunk's rider. The Blood Skunk didn't appreciate that, and so, without his rider present to restrain him, it killed the Blue Knight and his horse. and a number of men who are foolish enough to attempt to stop it. In the words of my dad, the T-Rex is gonna win. They fight dirty. And while they technically lost the match, I'd still say they came out better than their opponent. After the incident, new OSHA rules for bringing dinosaurs to events were enacted, and yes, OSHA got invented a lot sooner in this universe because dinosaurs. After this incident, anytime predators were brought into a city or to an event, they were required to be cuffed and possibly muzzled if the animal had a history. This was the last time that the blood skunk lost a match, partly because the raptor learned some jousting tricks, and partly because nobody wanted to risk a repetition of that first match, even if the raptor was cuffed and muzzled. Can we just appreciate these paint jobs? I'm not a great painter, but I'm really happy with these guys, especially the Blue Knight. Even now I can see things that I would have done differently, especially the shield. But they look great. I wasn't thrilled about this project halfway through, and then I started painting the raptor and gave him that stripe, and now I forgot his eyes. And now I'm excited for this project again. I sliced the minis off the cardboard and then the cardboard off the minis and glued them in place. Then all that was left was to give it a nice black border. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and with that, I'll see you in the future.